So, Mark, why do you think there was a story that turned out to be bogus, that these ransom notes that we got and that the Tucson stations got were fake?
I don't think the story was bogus. I think it was planted, and frankly, by somebody in the FBI. Okay, Harvey, last week caused a firestorm. As we taped this on Thursday, yesterday, I was told, and sure enough, it happened, there was a Reuters report which was flat out wrong. But in Reuters' defense, they reported that the FBI did not believe any of these ransom notes.
The two in particular sent to both TMZ and to local television stations in Tucson.
Correct. And that was put out there. They've traced the FBI traced it back. They know exactly internally where that came from, which was FBI generated. And they felt so compelled to not only kind of bitch slap, if you will, the ones who leaked it, but they actually issued out of the Phoenix office a press release from the FBI less than 24 hours ago, saying that they still believe a couple of these, the ones that Reuters had reported, like I said, to Reuters, in Reuters' defense, they were getting it from sources, but the sources had their own access to grind. And so I said, well, why is this? What happened here? And I know you yesterday reported that you went back to your sources and you knew as a precipient witness that in fact the FBI was taking it seriously. This came from the top of the FBI. I'll leave it at that. That specifically there were mistakes that were made by FBI agents initially. You know how everybody was talking that it was the sheriff, and everybody was laying blame.
Yeah, everybody blamed it on the sheriff.
Right. Well, apparently the sheriff was not the only one. Local field office apparently had some missteps, and they were course corrected quickly. But some of the people trying to protect their territory put this story, the what now has been a repudiated story, out. And then, as we tape this, there is a plea that's being reported by NBC News that somebody is entering a plea to, or has entered a plea to, a phony ransom note. There was a concerted effort to try to basically cover the tracks. This person pled. They knew the person was going to plea yesterday when they released this story to Reuters, but that does not take away from the fact that, yes, in fact, they are seriously taking the ones that you got and the ones that the local affiliate received as well.
Okay.
Totally seriously, and think they're real.
I want to talk about two things with you. One is why they would say something like this. Somebody in the FBI would say something like that, where they're not considering the notes when they really were, and two, what the screw-ups were. So I want to talk about those two things. But let me just, so everybody understands what happened here. So we received the first ransom note along with two television stations in Phoenix. That ransom note said, give us $4 million. And if you don't give it to us by the deadline, it goes to $6 million. And if you don't give it to us by that deadline, we'll kill Nancy Guthrie. Then 4 days later, they send a second note, and we know it's the same person based on the emails, and there are markers on it. But it's the same person. Writes a second ransom note to one of the Tucson stations saying, Nancy's dead. And we didn't do it. She just died. And they never asked for any money. They just said it. And the next day, that's when Savannah said, we will pay you. Just let us know how to get our mother back. And the reason she said it that way was that second note didn't ask for a particular amount of ransom. It just said, I think what happened was the kidnappers did this to get money, and they thought, oh, we can get a quick payday, and then she dies on them, and
Unexpectedly,
they're
they didn't
thinking,
know the
oh
medical history or
shit,
anything else, right?
we're murderers now, and they just went underground, never to be heard again. And that's why she made the plea saying, we will pay you. The reason she didn't pay is she didn't know what they wanted at that point, and they never got back. So we had always been told by the FBI, and we had numerous contacts with them. They had multiple people talking to our IT team all the time. I was talking to them. They told us, we believe those ransom notes are real. And then we started getting this guy who was constantly contacting us saying, I know who the kidnappers are. Give me 1 Bitcoin and I will lead you to them. So Reuters comes
when you
out.
get the Reuters story,
Well,
which came out on Wednesday, 7/1, what are you saying to yourself?
Well,
I know what I was saying.
Well, what I said to myself was, look, I want to make sure maybe they're right. Maybe they've decided that it would have surprised me given all the communications we had. But when I saw this Reuters story that said that the FBI believes those ransom notes, as well as those demand letters we received, are fake. And when I saw that, I thought, that's just not aligning with what I had been told. But maybe they got this. I mean, I didn't discount it. So I contacted 2 people at the FBI, one of whom is involved in the investigation. Another is an official. And the official in particular said, look, I will tell you this on background, that it is we believe it is more likely than not that the 2 ransom notes are legitimate, are real. We have less comfort believing that those demand letters, for the Bitcoin are real, but we haven't discounted that either. Now, this person was very careful, and it was really an interesting call because I really had to press to get an answer on this thing. And so there was something going on in the FBI at the time, but this person was very clear, more likely than not, that it was, if you had it, I even talked about, what if it's if it were a civil case, 5149, is the majority on the side of legitimacy? The answer was yes. So I kept getting, yeah, we're absolutely looking at these, which is what I knew, but this person affirmed it, and so did the other person.
Exactly. And so so there's 2 ways to interpret this, given
and
that
then the FBI came out later in the day and said, look, some of these notes are bogus. They called it extortion, but some of them we are pursuing as possibly legitimate. So we know what the 2 are. They're the 2 we received in the Tucson station.
Right. And that FBI press release, we should probably show that or put it up on the screen. That's the first time in I don't know how long they have commented that directly on something like this in a while. And there's 2 interpretations. In fact, by the time this drops, I'll probably have got the answer. But one is somebody knew in the FBI about the plea that was happening today to somebody who basically had just done an extortionate, went off the reservation, or what I was told yesterday, which was no, they wanted to, the higher ups at the FBI wanted to make it clear that somebody had gotten out over their skis trying to protect themselves, or CYA, and that's why they planted that story with Reuters.
The official told me, and because I even said, do you think somebody actually told Reuters this? And the answer I got back was, look, there are a lot of people involved in this investigation, and not everybody feels exactly the same way. It was kind of a weird comment because it was hedging it. Because they clearly, based on what I know, and now based on what the FBI said, they were clearly still looking at this as possible as a real lead. And that statement was, we've determined that it's fake, and that's just not true. So I guess I want to get to you now. 2 things. One, why do you think that there were people who said that incorrectly that they viewed these ransom letters as fake? And two, you mentioned that the FBI screwed this case up. Let's go into both of those. But first, why do you think that people in the FBI told Reuters that the ransom letters were fake?
Because there was a miss, is what I'm told, in the original and second. There were two waves, if you will, of letters, and supposedly they missed something which somebody else at the FBI subsequently picked up on, and that was the fissure, so to speak, between the two. So you've got a contingent who missed it. You've got some, and we hit on part of this apparently kind of unknowingly last week. You had identified the reason that you thought this most recent one was from the same person was the wallet address, and the wallet address, old one and new one, was referenced. Apparently, they had done something.
I know what it is. When you just said that, I think I know what it is, Mark. I think I know what it is. So, and we can talk about this now because it's come out. So, I don't remember how long into the case, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month. They were constantly calling us, talking to the IT team, trying to figure out how to trace the Bitcoin address or how to trace the email we got, and they couldn't do it. So I got a call and they said, look, we are going to put some money in the Bitcoin account to see if we can trace, oh my God, I think this is it, to see if they could trace the money back to the person who took it. And they said, please do not report that money is in the Bitcoin account. It's going to compromise the investigation. And so I didn't. We didn't say anything, but we saw the money surface. It was only like $270, $285. I think they were just trying to trigger something. And so we didn't say anything. And then a couple of days later, one of the Tucson stations that also had the Bitcoin address published a story that money went into the Bitcoin address. And the FBI didn't want that known. And I called somebody at the FBI. In fact, I was on the phone with two people at the same time. And I said, well, this Tucson station just reported what you told me not to say. What happened? And one of them said to the other, did that Tucson station also get the ransom note? And it's like, yeah. I mean, it was widely reported they did. So I think they forgot to call that second Tucson station, and the second Tucson station blew their cover on what they were trying to do. And
internally,
and it was a screw up. And I never really thought of that again until you just said that. That was definitely a screw up.
Well, that fits precisely with what I was told, that there was an initial screw up. They then figured it out, and then that is where the fissure happened. And that's precisely, that fits exactly with what I was told, that it was people trying to cover their territory and CYA on this. And you take it one step farther, because if in fact they had figured that out even quicker and had been able to reverse engineer, so to speak, to the Bitcoin address, which they did once they put the money in, God knows if she would have passed, if she did pass 5 days later.
Well, I think it was earlier than 5 days later. I think it was, I don't know. I mean, look, these demand letters we got that I have always had this nagging feeling might be real, that if you believe that person, it would have been on that Wednesday after the kidnapping on Sunday. But whatever it was before that Friday, because that's when the second note came to the Tucson station saying Nancy was dead. So it happened within days. And
it happened directly in that timeline of the if you believe yet the most recent one you have, where there's supposedly a screen grab, there's supposedly an external driver, something that's stashed. It was in real time, and there is a lot of internal second and third guessing as to who dropped the ball when and why they didn't kind of tie up all the loose ends.
So it doesn't feel like everybody in the FBI clearly is not on board with what's going on here, because if there are, as you put it, a couple of people who went off the reservation, this is not where they're all aligned.
They are not aligned. I mean, I know that for as close as one gets to a fact. And all you've got to do is take a look at how quickly that FBI press release came out after the Reuters story. All I know is when I saw the Reuters story, I said to myself, Harvey must be having a TIA, because there is no way, having dealt with it and knowing how much the amount of resources that was expended both by you internally and by them externally, that made any sense whatsoever. If they thought that was a fraud, they're not going to run it to ground like they were doing in real time.
Yeah, I mean, look, my sense was it wasn't true. But again, a lot of times these cases take crazy twists and turns. And I've just seen things that are so illogical on their face, and they turn out to be true, that I thought, well, I had to pursue it and ask and call. And even after calling the person involved in the investigation, I kind of felt like, well, I still need to go higher. And that's when I talked to this official, and the official, to me, made it clear by saying, look, it's more likely than not that it's legit. I did not expect they were going to put a press release out, although I will say that I'm sure they got a flurry of phone calls, because Reuters is coming out saying these ransom notes are fake. And then I do something mid-morning on Wednesday saying, I made calls. They're saying more likely than not real. And so I think because people saw it was going two different ways, they must have gotten a lot of phone calls, and they finally said but they didn't have to say anything.
No, they didn't have to say a thing. They could have just been dismissive and slow walked it, or just ignored it.
You know why? Why I think they wanted to come out and say something, because I think that those notes, they believe that somebody is going to blab something, and that if they just if people just thought, well, those notes are fake, then all of the clues that might lead you to the actual person from that note, people are going to say, oh, it can't be true. So I think they wanted to keep that alive, and that's why they said, no, there are some notes that are real. I'm a little surprised. Why didn't they say those two? Why weren't they more specific? I mean, it's clear they're talking about those two.
So I think you're spot on, and I'll tell you why. As you know, in these cases, the first 48, 72 hours, 96 hours at the outside, generally, if you're going to solve it, you're going to solve it right then with traditional police or detective work or investigative work. Once you get past that period of time, and the case becomes cold, and especially a case like this, which has got just enormous resources and attention in it, then the overwhelming majority of times, the way it gets solved is loose lips, or somebody drops a dime on somebody else, or somebody gets careless, or something like that. I think that we are in that window. I think they honestly believe within the FBI right now, in the people who have been kind of firing in all cylinders. They think right now is the time when somebody is going to come forward, and
Why are you saying
upset.
that? Why?
Because the last note that we talked about last week, it resonated with them in a interesting way. The fact that it had the old wallet address and then referenced a new one gave it some credibility. And you don't know if it's a fraudster or not. And as I said, or we said, somebody apparently pled to being a fraudster. However, there were kind of earmarks or indicia in there that they believed internally could be, to your point, more likely than not legit. If that's the case, and there's somebody out there, and fully expect that right now is the time when somebody may be doing that, and they don't want to quell that. They want to do the opposite. They want to encourage that person, come in from the cold, tell us what you know, and we'll cloak you with something. That's why I kept saying last week, if you're not a fraudster, now is the time to strike.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know what I was just thinking of? That early on in the investigation, there were certain items that were found that got a lot of news attention. I'm not going to say what it is because they haven't done anything with this, but there was one particular item, and I talked to somebody in the FBI who said, we believe that somebody in the media may have planted that item to get attention, and that if they can prove that and they believed it to be true, they would prosecute the individual. And that never happened. It never happened.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was just a really interesting sidebar. We never really talked about, we never reported that, but I remember somebody told me that, and they really believed it. But again, maybe there's no proof of it because they never prosecuted anybody on that. But it's just an interesting. It was just an interesting kind of sidebar for me that they were really having trouble containing things because there was so much interest. Everybody was getting in everybody's way.
Well, and the most contaminated scene you could ever imagine if you had sent to or had wanted to design how to have a transference issues and create a defense lawyer's petri dish for mischief, it would have been the way that crime scene was handled.
So you've done so many of these crime cases. If you were in charge of the FBI on Monday morning after Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped, what would you have done? That might have made it. That might have made a difference.
Immediately engaged with the ransom notes. That was your single best lead while doing. And by the way,
but engaged how? Engaged how to pay the money?
I would have paid it. I would have paid it immediately.
You would have paid the $4 million.
Absolutely, I would have paid the $4 million. I would have done it. They have. I know for a fact, just given some of the other cases I've handled and that I've looked at, they have ways of retrieving that. They have ways of blocking that. They can trace that.
They couldn't do it, man. I'm telling you, they tried. They couldn't do it. Believe me, they were all over.
They've prosecuted. There are people sitting in federal prison who could do it tomorrow. I mean, they've got.
Mark, I swear to you, there was one call with 5 agents on the phone with my IT team. They were doing everything they could, and I remember my IT team. It got so complicated. They were saying that when they went on the tip line, there was a cookie that would have dropped, and the cookie could relate back to when they sent the email. And there's a way of reverse engineering. It was so complicated. They did everything they could.
There's somebody watching this who would say that was an older generation or iteration, that the newest and the cutting edge ability is well beyond that. The fact that they were talking about that, I call it that kind of breadcrumb theory, tells me that they just didn't have the cutting edge. And that is part of the problem. What they did do, give them kudos for what they did do. Getting that Nest Cam was incredible. But there were other things that I think could have been done with that Nest Cam immediately and may have been done, just haven't been reported. And if you were to criticize anything, they should have had their best and their brightest on the scene immediately and not waited. And
they weren't called in until 48 hours after.
And like I said, there is a window. It's almost a kind of a rule of thumb. If you don't solve it in that first 48, 72, 96, you're not going to.
But they have to be invited. I mean, look, you think about
it. No, I don't think.
No. Think about it on the other. Think about it on the other.
It's like saying you have to be invited. Have the National Guard invited.
No,
the FBI is the 800-pound gorilla. They go wherever they want.
Think about it on the other side. That if they would have jumped because it was Savannah Guthrie's mother then all of these other people whose mothers or sisters or children were kidnapped, they're going to come out and just torch the FBI and say, oh, you're doing that because Savannah's a celebrity, but you didn't do it with us. So they just couldn't win if they did something like that.
Yeah, I understand the PR angle.
Yeah,
The human
but it's
angle
real.
is this.
But it's real.
But you could also send another message. If people know that immediately they're going to be apprehended, and remember, you and I heard the locals talking about it in the first couple of days. This is not uncommon. It's not an everyday occurrence, but these kinds of kidnappings across the border, in proximity to the border, are not uncommon. And that is one way to send a message, so to speak.
So at this point,
At this point, it's got to be.
we talked last week about this guy that's been sending us these notes. He sent another note saying, okay, if you're not taking me seriously, I'm done, because he was watching the social media posts that we were putting up. So I would not be surprised if he's watching us right now. So you told me last week there was better than a 65% chance you believe this guy. Like
Correct.
I said, the FBI has questions, has doubts, but you believed him. And frankly, I believe him more than the FBI does, I think. So you have the stage mark. He's probably watching this because it seems like he watches everything. Talk to him.
Well, what you've got to do is you've got to reach out now.
No, you're talking directly to him, Mark.
Yeah, and you right now need to talk to a lawyer, give the information to your lawyer. You don't have to give all of it, but give enough so that you can get the kind of coverage that you need, the protection that you need. And by the way, do a fellow human a solid and give the closure to the family by giving them the information and telling them who's responsible. And you can get protected at the same time. This happens all the time. It is not unusual. It's something you can do. You can do it now.
So his concern is multiple. One, that he says he might be implicated because he knows these kidnappers. He says there are two. Well, and he has a record. He has a burglary on his record 11 years ago. So that's one of his things. And the second thing is that he's worried that they will seek revenge on this guy, which frankly, it sounds to me like these guys are not into the violence of hurting somebody because they freaked out when Nancy died. So I don't know, maybe they would be, but he's concerned about them going after him and him getting implicated by authorities.
I would be more scared if I'm him. If you're listening, I'm more scared that you've already revealed enough about yourself that they know who you are and would come for you if that was a legitimate fear. You can dispel that fear. You can at least mitigate that if you lawyer up and get in there and get a deal done. You will get a deal done. I can tell you with about as much assurance, other than death and taxes, that a competent lawyer will be able to cut a deal for you, give you protection, get you out of harm's way, number two, and accomplish something good and turn a horrible situation into a redeeming situation. So I don't know. This is not an impossible situation you find yourself in. This is a situation that has all the earmarks and tools of being able to solve.
What if he's greedy and really wants that Bitcoin, which he hasn't gotten, and he says, "Look,
if he waits any longer, the Bitcoin's going to go down to practically nothing."
Well,
so.
I mean, he could still ask for money. So,
Yes.
I mean, does money at all factor in if he does something like this, or do you have to discard that and just say, "Look, give me immunity"?
There's already $1 million reward. If that's what's motivating you, what are you waiting for? Why are you looking for $32,000, $60,000 in Bitcoin when there's $1 million out there? Have your lawyer broker a deal and go get you your $1 million.
Okay. The final thing that is just, it's so interesting that, we've been working on this thing for so long, and, you've said like 5 things here that have just really kind of struck me. When you said the FBI did something wrong, is one of those things that they didn't, and I don't know what they said to the Guthrie family, but is one of those things maybe not pushing the Guthrie family to pay that money early on? Is that what you're driving at?
All I will tell you is that there is a split in the FBI, and there are the initial people who were on this are being second guessed wildly and have basically been vindicated, and that is precisely why it played out the way it did yesterday. There were missteps, there were course corrections. They believed the course corrections were too late. But now you're in a spot where they think that the public and specifically Confederates can help, and that's what they want. They don't want to dissuade people from helping.
Okay.
That's where we're
Sounds
at.
good. Have a good 4th, my friend.
Happy 4th. Happy 250th.
But you don't look a day over 125.
I was going to say, that was my joke. Thank you.